I gave my daughter a house, hoping it would become her sanctuary. But that very day, her husband, Caleb, arrived with his family, and they treated her like a guest in her own home, demanding, entitled, and smirking as if they'd won something. Their smiles were smug, but I promised myself those smiles wouldn't last. My phone vibrated just as I was signing the final papers. I nearly dropped the pen. On the other end, Ivy's voice came through, soft and strained, like a porcelain plate about to crack. "Dad," she whispered. "Caleb says. He says the house isn't what he expected." In the background, his voice cut through, sharp and dripping with disdain. "Not my taste, Em. You know that." The pen creaked in my grip, its plastic bending beneath the tension in my fingers. The notary, a silver-haired woman with the kind of smile only years of routine could produce, slid the final document across the cluttered desk. I nodded stiffly, scrawling my signature in jagged ink. The office smelled faintly of burnt coffee and paper dust. Overhead, a flickering fluorescent light buzzed, casting a pale, sickly glow across the stacks of folders around us. Ivy had called at the worst possible time, just as I was finalizing the gift I'd spent over a decade planning, a house for her. Something lasting. Something that could never be taken away. I'd sold off nearly half my design firm to make it happen, a sleek two-story just outside Marlow Heights, with tall glass windows and a backyard garden she'd always dreamed of. But Caleb was already poisoning it. "I'm sorry, Dad," Ivy murmured. "He's just stressed." Her voice trembled, and I imagined her standing in that half-empty kitchen, clutching the phone, her dark eyes wide with unease. I wanted to tell her to leave him, to walk away without looking back. But I bit down on the words. Not today. Not when I was about to hand her the keys. "It's all right, sweetheart," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the heat rising in my chest. "Just focus on getting settled. I'll be there soon." I ended the call, my thumb lingering on the screen. The notary arched a brow, but I ignored her, signing the last sheet. The keys sat on the desk beside us, their steel gleaming faintly under the artificial light. The name Ivy had been engraved on the burlap, delicate but permanent. They felt icy in my palm, heavy with both hope and foreboding. 8 years ago, after my wife passed, I made a promise Ivy would never go without. I remembered her at 9, sketching a dream home on a napkin at an old roadside diner. Big windows, a wraparound porch, flowers everywhere. That memory had fueled every late night at the firm, every sacrifice. I'd lost business partners, friends, and plenty of sleep. But this house was supposed to be something untainted. The notary cleared her throat. "Congratulations, Mr. Harrow. It's official." She handed me the deed, crisp, embossed, weighty. I slid it into my jacket, placing it just over my heart. "Thank you," I muttered, though my mind had already drifted back to Caleb's mocking tone. Not my taste. What did that even mean? The house was perfect. Polished wood floors, white walls, a garden where Ivy could finally plant those roses she always talked about. If he didn't appreciate it, that was on him. But I knew it wouldn't end there. Not with him. I stepped outside. The early March air bit at my skin. The streets of Marlow Heights were still, quiet, a slate-gray sky stretching above. My car was parked just across the street, but I paused, pulling the keys from my coat and running my thumb over the engraving. Ivy had always been too kind, especially with Caleb. Even when his comments started shifting from charming to cruel, I'd seen the change, heard it in his voice. I'd told myself she'd figure it out, that she was strong enough. But that call, her voice didn't sound right. The phone buzzed again. A message from Ivy. "We're at the house. Can you come now?" I typed back quickly, my fingers cold and stiff, on my way. Sliding into the driver's seat, I started the engine. The drive was short, but my mind was anything but calm. I saw her at 17, laughing as we painted her bedroom in the old house. I saw her at 26, glowing but anxious as she introduced me to Caleb. I hadn't liked him then, too slick, too charming, like someone selling something with no return policy. But I said nothing. For her. The house came into view. Its wide windows caught what little sunlight filtered through the clouds. Ivy stood in the driveway, coat pulled close against the wind. She smiled when she saw me, but it didn't reach her eyes. I parked and got out, the keys like lead in my pocket. "Dad," she said, hurrying toward me. Her hug was warm, but her hands shook slightly. I held her tightly, trying to absorb some of the tension I felt buzzing off her. "It's yours now," I told her, pressing the keys into her palm. She looked down, her fingers curling slowly around them like they might vanish. "Thank you," she whispered. But her eyes flicked toward the house, toward the open trunk of Caleb's car and the half-unpacked boxes spilling onto the driveway. Her smile slipped. I nearly asked her about the call, about Caleb, but something in her face stopped me. Instead, I placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Let's go inside." She nodded, clutching the keys so tightly her knuckles turned white. As we walked toward the door, the garden flowers shifted in the breeze, their petals glowing with color against the gray sky. I told myself this was her new beginning, but the way she hesitated, how her eyes flicked back toward Caleb's car, told a different story entirely. Then the front door slammed. A woman's voice sliced the silence like a blade. "This kitchen's too small. Honestly, Ivy, did you even look at this place?" I wasn't there, but I could see it vividly. Ivy, frozen mid-step, twisting a dish towel in her hands while Caleb's mother, Evelyn, barked orders like she was inspecting a hotel suite. By then, I was back in my cottage in Pine Grove, pacing the worn rug of my living room when Ivy called. Her voice was tight, like she was trying to breathe underwater. "We're settling in," she said. But the quiver in her words said otherwise. I'd left her at the house less than an hour earlier after handing her the keys. She'd hugged me goodbye with a smile that felt more like an apology than joy, and I'd driven home with a stone in my stomach. Now I sat on my old leather sofa, phone pressed to my ear, imagining the mess that was unfolding. "Settling in how?" I asked gently, keeping my tone light. She hesitated. "It's just a lot of boxes. Evelyn's, particular about where things go." In the background, something crashed, glass or ceramic, followed by Caleb's laugh. "Careful, Em. Don't break my stuff." My jaw tensed. I could already see it. The pristine white walls marked by careless hands, the hardwood floors dulled by heavy boots, the garden ivy loved already flattened beneath moving crates and footsteps. "Are you okay?" I asked. She forced a laugh, thin and brittle. "Fine, Dad. Just busy." But I heard Evelyn again, her voice cutting through the call. "Ivy, this coffee is already cold." The line dropped. I stared at the phone, heart thudding, mind racing. I didn't need to be there to know what was happening. I saw Ivy in that spotless kitchen, hair pulled back, lips pressed together, trying to play hostess while being treated like Steph. Evelyn would be pacing, heels clicking, arms crossed, barking instructions with a full cup of coffee untouched. Caleb would be on the couch, jacket tossed aside, wearing that smug grin that dared her to complain. And Ivy, my Ivy, would be tiptoeing around them all, her voice small, her smile polite, doing everything not to cause a scene. I remembered the day we toured the place, just the two of us. She had traced her fingers along the kitchen counter, eyes glowing. "I'll plant roses out back," she'd said, gesturing toward the garden. "And we'll have dinners here, Dad. You'll come every Sunday." That was the Ivy I knew, hopeful, full of plans. But marriage to Caleb had dulled that light in her, dimmed her like a fading lamp left too long in the cold. And I should have seen it sooner. My phone buzzed. A text. "Can you call later? Things are hectic." I typed a reply, of course, but hovered over the send button. Every instinct screamed to drive back, to walk through that door and pull her out. But I stayed seated. She'd asked for space. I had to respect that. Instead, I stood and moved to the window, staring out at the still, tree-lined street. My cottage was small and cluttered, walls covered in snapshots of Ivy, her graduation, her wedding, crayon drawings from when she was just a little girl. One drawing in a frame showed the house she dreamed of, tall windows, porch swings, flowers blooming in every corner. I made it real. But at what cost? Back at her place, I could see it clearly. torn boxes blocking hallways, clothes and kitchenware spilling out. Evelyn criticizing every detail, the curtains too thin, the lighting too cold, even the fresh paint too sharp. Caleb's sister, Emma, would echo her mother's complaints, more mimic than mind. Their father would hover nearby, silent, cradling a drink, eyes downcast. And Ivy, she'd be moving from room to room, tray in hand, offering coffee or tea, her hands trembling just enough to spill a drop. Her smile stretched tight, her eyes scanning the room for someone to please. She'd offer sandwiches. "We're not hungry," Evelyn would snap, brushing her off, then turning to Caleb with a sneer. "This place needs work. It's not ours yet." Ours. That word would land like a blow, and Ivy would nod. She always nodded. My hands clenched, nails digging into my palms. The house was hers. I made sure of it. The deed held her name, not Caleb's. But already they were laying claim to it, like scavengers over something that was never theirs. A memory came sharp and fast, Emily at 10, dropping a glass at a family cookout. It shattered and she froze, waiting for punishment. But I had knelt beside her, picking up the pieces one by one. "It's just glass," I told her. "You're what matters." Now I imagined her again in that house. Something falling. Maybe a dish from her childhood. A box knocked from a table. It shatters. She stares at it, frozen, eyes glistening. Alone in a room full of people who never really saw her. The image scorched my mind. I grabbed the phone and dialed. It rang twice before she picked up, voice low. "Dad, now's not great." Behind her, Evelyn's voice rose again, something about missing towels. Caleb laughed, careless and loud. "Everything all right?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She paused. "It's fine. I'll call you tomorrow." Then silence. The line went dead. I stood in my quiet house, phone warm in my hand, the weight of her words, her lie, echoing louder than anything else. Back in her kitchen, Evelyn jabbed a finger at the table. "Is that dirt? You can't even keep this place clean, Ivy?" I wasn't there to witness it firsthand, but Ivy's voice over the phone painted the scene with painful precision. She'd called me that morning, her words clipped and cautious, like she feared someone might hear her breathing too loud. "They're still unpacking," she said. But the tension in her voice told me it was more than just boxes. I stood in my kitchen, hand wrapped around the counter, the coffee I'd poured cooling, untouched beside me. It was the morning after, and Ivy's house, her house, had already become a battlefield. I could picture her there in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, scrubbing dishes like her life depended on it, sweat dotting her forehead. The air would smell of burnt toast and spoiled milk, breakfast long finished, one she hadn't been invited to share. Evelyn's heels would tap against the hardwood like a metronome of disapproval. "This is your mess," she'd say, gesturing to a spotless countertop as if accusing Ivy of a crime. Her lip would curl with contempt. Ivy would nod, lips pressed together, her hands raw from scrubbing. "They're just particular," she murmured into the phone, barely audible. In the background, I heard Caleb's voice, relaxed and mocking. You missed a spot. Don't make my mom finish your job." My stomach turned. Still, I forced calm into my voice. "You don't have to do everything, sweetheart. It's your house." She laughed, dry, lifeless. "It's fine, Dad. I've got it." But she didn't. I could hear it in her voice, the weight pressing down on her like 1,000 quiet expectations. I imagined her wiping the table slowly, methodically, as if hoping to vanish into the motions. Evelyn would linger nearby, eyes scanning for flaws. "These plates are chipped," she'd snap, holding one up like it was damning evidence. Ivy would stammer an apology, cheeks flushed, and return to her cleaning. Caleb would be sprawled across the living room sofa, phone in hand, tuning it all out. "It's your house, right?" he'd mutter, the sarcasm practically dripping from his voice. I thought of Ivy before all this, before him. At 21, she was bold, unflinching. I'd watched her argue with contractors at my firm, sharp-witted and direct, unafraid to speak her mind. Caleb had dulled that flame, and I'd let it happen, thinking she'd find her own way through. But now, when I thought of her in that kitchen, She felt like a shadow of the woman I once knew, muted, unsure, fragile. My hands trembled as I set my coffee down, the ceramic mug chipped along the edge from years of use. I saw her again in my mind, trying to reclaim some control. "Can you help with the dishes?" she'd ask Caleb, her voice soft but steady. He'd chuckle without even looking up. "Why? You're doing great." Evelyn would chime in, cool and sharp. "Don't expect my son to clean up after you." Ivy's shoulders would fall. She'd turn back to the sink, the water splashing over her wrists. A spoon might slip from her fingers and hit the floor with a hard clatter, a sound that felt louder than it was, sharp enough to sting. That image lodged in my chest. I saw her crouch to pick it up, hands shaking, while Evelyn stood behind her, arms crossed like a warden. The house keys I'd given her, engraved with her name, probably sat in her pocket. A reminder, a symbol, but not a shield. They couldn't protect her from this. Not from Caleb's cold indifference. Not from Evelyn's constant, cutting disapproval. I couldn't wait any longer. I dialed her number. It rang 3 times before she answered. Her voice was low, urgent. "Dad, I'm in the middle of..." Evelyn's voice pierced the background. "Ivy, the towels are still damp. Do I have to do everything around here?" Ivy exhaled, barely audible, and I tightened my grip on the phone. "You don't sound okay," I said. There was a pause, just long enough for me to feel the full weight of it. "I'm fine," she said, but her voice cracked. "Just a sliver. Just enough. I'll call you tomorrow." The line went dead. I stood there in the quiet of my cottage, the stillness pressing in from all sides. And I saw her clear as day, alone in that house, surrounded by people who saw her as a burden rather than family. Fury rose, sharp and searing, but deeper than that, a resolve began to take root. That house was supposed to be her sanctuary. I had poured everything into it, time, money, memories, to build a future she could claim. But they had turned it into a place she feared. Their smug grins, their entitled glares. I could see them all in my mind, and I made a silent vow. They wouldn't smile for long. My phone buzzed again, this time a voice message. I pressed play, and Ivy's voice trembled through the speaker, breaking me in half. "Dad, I can't do this anymore. They're treating me like I'm nothing." Each word felt like glass in my chest. I gripped the edge of the table as she spoke in broken fragments, about the endless chores, the barking orders, Evelyn's constant criticism. The cottage felt suffocating. The creak of the old wooden floor beneath my pacing feet echoed in the silence. The air smelled of cold coffee and panic. "Sweetheart," I whispered, my voice low, barely holding back, "why didn't you tell me sooner?" She sobbed, a soft, helpless sound that gutted me. "I didn't want you to worry. Please, Dad, don't come here. It'll only make it worse." Her voice cracked on the last word. But instead of making me pause, it only fed the fire already roaring in my chest. I saw her again, clearer than ever, her hands raw from cleaning, her eyes downcast, her voice a whisper in a house that never listened. And I knew, without question, this wasn't over. My house, her home. "I'll fix this," I told her, my voice steady, though my hands trembled. "Please don't do anything rash," Ivy sniffled, her voice barely holding together. The call ended. I stood there, frozen, the phone warm in my hand. The only sound in the cottage was the ticking of the old mantel clock. A photograph of Ivy at 10, beaming with paint smeared across her cheeks, stared back at me from the wall. I'd failed her once by trusting Caleb, believing he'd love and protect her. I would never make that mistake again. 2 decades ago, a business partner betrayed me, drained our accounts, and left me scrambling to salvage what I'd built. I'd trusted that man, just as I'd once trusted Caleb to be a decent husband. That betrayal had hardened something inside me. It taught me how to see beyond rehearsed smiles and empty promises. And as I stared into that photo of my daughter, I felt that old edge return, sharper, colder than before. Caleb and Evelyn had crossed a line, and they were going to learn what regret felt like. I paced to the window, watching as the dusk settled in across Pine Grove. The sky was bruising purple, clouds heavy with the promise of rain. As I passed the table, the coffee mug rattled, leaving a dark ring on the wood I didn't care to wipe away. My thoughts were spinning Evelyn's sharp orders, Caleb's taunts, the way they had taken Ivy's space and twisted it into something ugly. The house was in her name. I had ensured that. But they were acting like it belonged to them. Like she belonged to them. I turned back to the photo on the wall and lifted it gently, my thumb brushing against Ivy's smiling face. She'd been so full of light that day. When I gave her the keys, she was glowing, already dreaming of garden roses and Sunday dinners. Now she was calling me in secret, begging me not to show up, begging me to stay away. My hand tightened around the frame, the glass groaning under the pressure. I couldn't just stand here and stew while she endured whatever was happening in that house. The keys to my car jingled as I snatched them off the counter. Their familiar weight in my pocket steadied me. I pulled on my coat, the fabric catching on my shoulder as I moved. Outside, the wind had picked up, stinging against my face. I locked the door behind me, the hinges creaking, an old, tired sound that matched the ache in my chest. I climbed into the car. The leather seats were stiff and cold, but the engine roared to life without hesitation. The dashboard lit up, casting harsh light across my clenched fists gripping the wheel. I drove through the quiet neighborhoods of Marlow Heights. Houses passed in a blur, warm windows glowing behind drapes. But all I could hear was Ivy's voice. Shaking. Hollow. I saw Evelyn's tight smile in my mind, Caleb's smug grin. My jaw clenched until my teeth ached. They thought they could push her around. Humiliate her. And I'd just stay home and do nothing? They didn't know me at all. The street leading to Ivy's house stretched ahead, streetlights flickering like reluctant witnesses. I didn't know exactly what I was going to say when I got there, or what I'd do, but I knew I had to show up. I had to look her in the eye. I had to remind them whose house this really was. The keys in my coat pocket pressed into my leg, a small but insistent reminder of the promise I'd made to give Ivy safety, freedom, and peace. I would fight for that, whatever it took. I knocked on the door hard. My fist landed against the wood like a judge's gavel. The house stood still and shadowed, its windows catching the last glimmer of twilight. Then the door creaked open. Evelyn stood there, leaning against the frame. Her perfume was overpowering, her smile razor-sharp. "Mr. Harrow," she drawled. "What a surprise." Her voice was syrupy with condescension. I brushed past her without a word, stepping into the living room. My boots scuffed the floors Ivy had spent weeks choosing. The place was in disarray. Boxes half opened. A wine glass abandoned on the coffee table. A thin haze of cigarette smoke hung in the air, stubborn and sour. Caleb slouched on the couch, staring at his phone, disinterested. Ivy stood in the corner, arms crossed, her expression panicked. "Dad," she whispered, shaking her head slightly. But I didn't stop. "You need to leave," I said, my voice low and firm, slicing through the stale air. "This is Ivy's house, not yours." Evelyn laughed, a brittle, metallic sound, and tapped her long fingernail on the table like it was a drum of authority. "Oh, Victor," she said. "Don't be so dramatic." Caleb looked up, his grin lazy and mocking. "You heard her. Chill out, old man." I took a step forward, fists clenched. "You have no right to treat her this way. No right to be here. Pack up. Get out." Ivy's breath caught in her throat, but she didn't move. Her eyes, wide and pleading, kept flicking from me to Caleb. Evelyn folded her arms, her gold necklace catching the light as she tilted her head. "And who exactly is going to make us?" "You." Her voice was poisonous, every word a challenge. Caleb stood slowly, tossing his phone onto the couch. "You're out of your league, Victor." He turned to a nearby box and rifled through it, pulling out a folder and yanking a set of documents free. He waved them like a magician revealing a trick. "This says we stay. Legally." I froze. My eyes locked on the papers in his hand. The font looked wrong. The paper was too clean. But the words "property transfer" hit like a blow to the gut. "What is that?" I asked, my voice tight. "Our claim," Evelyn said coolly, stepping forward, her heels sharp against the floor. "You really thought we'd just walk away?" Caleb tossed the folder onto the coffee table. One page slid to the floor, and he bent down to grab it, his earlier confidence faltering for a moment. Ivy didn't say a word. Her hands were trembling, fingers twisting the fabric of her sleeve. "Dad, please," she whispered. But I couldn't look at her. "Not yet. Those are fake," I said flatly, though my throat had gone dry. "You can't forge your way into someone else's home." Caleb laughed, but the sound rang hollow. His eyes darted toward Evelyn. Something in the room shifted. The show was beginning to unravel. "Tell that to a judge," Caleb said, his voice smug. Evelyn nodded, her smile widening like a blade. "Run along, Victor. You're embarrassing yourself." But I wasn't listening to them, I was remembering. The day Ivy first walked into this house, sunlight pouring through the windows, her laughter bouncing off the bare walls as she pointed out where she'd hang photos, where the dining table would go, what she'd plant in the garden. Now those same walls felt like a prison. Her dreams buried beneath boxes, cigarette smoke, and lies. My chest burned, but I forced myself to breathe. They thought they'd won with their mockery and flimsy papers. But they hadn't. Not even close. "You're not welcome here," I said, voice steady now. "And I'll prove it." I turned to Ivy. Her face was pale, her eyes glassy. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "I'm not done," I whispered just for her to hear. She gave the slightest nod, her lips trembling. Evelyn clapped slowly, mock applause echoing through the room. "Such a hero," she drawled. Caleb scoffed, clutching the documents in his hand like a weapon. But I didn't give them another word. I turned and walked out, the door slamming behind me, its echo sharp and final in the cold evening air. Wind stung my face as I crossed the driveway, the house looming behind me like a lie carved in brick. The car keys dug into my palm. I slid into the driver's seat, the engine roaring awake, and sat there for a moment, just staring at that house. Their laughter still rang in my ears. But louder was Ivy's whisper. I was going to make it right. The road ahead unspooled into darkness, and I drove, the streetlights flickering past like warnings. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I would do something. My phone buzzed, and I answered without looking. Evelyn's voice sliced through like ice. "You're making a mistake, Victor. Keep pushing and we'll bury you in court." Back at the cottage, I sat by the fire. The flames flickered, casting shadows across the walls. The warmth didn't touch the cold that had settled inside me. The scent of cedar mixed with stale coffee. The old clock on the mantel ticked like a countdown. "Your papers won't hold," I said calmly, though my fingers curled tighter around the phone. "They won't stand up in court." She laughed, a brittle sound, like glass cracking. "Oh, they're real enough. Go ask a lawyer." In the background, Caleb chimed in, cocky as ever. "Give it up, old man. You've already lost." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I could already picture them, sprawled across Ivy's living room like they belonged there. Their voices drowning out hers. Their clutter replacing her life. "I suggest you stay out of our way," Evelyn added, her tone snapping shut like a trap. "Or you'll regret it." The line went dead. I set the phone down. My hands no longer shook. The room around me was quiet, lined with years of memories, Ivy's school drawings, her graduation photo, a faded picture of us smiling at the shore. The life we'd built. The life they were now trying to erase. Just last night, she had called me, her voice barely above a whisper. "Dad, can you come get me?" I'd driven over in less than 15 minutes, heart pounding. She was already waiting on the porch with a single duffel bag at her feet. Her eyes were red. She looked like someone fleeing a war zone. Now she was upstairs, finally asleep in her childhood bed. For the first time in weeks, she was safe. I'd carried her bag inside myself. The zipper had split open halfway, her clothes spilling onto the floor like a snapshot of the chaos she'd left behind. We'd sat together by the fire, her head resting on my shoulder. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice tight with guilt. "You gave me that house, and I let them ruin it." I hugged her close, my throat thick. "It's not your fault," I said. "It's theirs." The floor creaked beneath my feet as I stood and walked to the window. Outside, the trees stood bare under a gray sky. Olivia's threats still rang in my ears. Those so-called documents, forged or not, they had done their job. They'd shaken Ivy's confidence. But I remembered her at 16, chin high, standing up to a boy twice her size who'd tried to humiliate a classmate. She'd walked straight into that moment like a storm. And I'd never been prouder. That fire was still in her. I just had to help her find it again. My phone buzzed once more. It was Ivy. "Dad," she said softly. "Are you okay?" I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. "Better now that you're here. Want some coffee?" There was a pause. "I'll be down," she said. I heard the slow shuffle of her steps overhead, and something inside me locked into place. This wasn't over. Not even close. I stepped into the kitchen, poured coffee into two chipped mugs, and watched the steam rise like a signal. The fire in the hearth threw amber light across the walls. She came down quietly, wrapped in a blanket, her hair a tangle, her eyes swollen but clear. She took the mug from my hand, her fingers brushing mine. We sat across from each other, the table between us, the silence thick but no longer hollow. "What do we do now?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "We fight," I said. "They don't get to take your home." She looked at me, really looked. And for the first time in days, I saw something return to her eyes, a flicker of belief, of strength. She nodded, then took a sip, her hands steady now. I glanced at the photo on the mantel. The one of Ivy, her mother, and me taken during one perfect summer, long before any of this. She had her mother's smile, her mother's strength. I would protect that no matter the cost. I stood, my chair scraping softly against the floor, and walked to the fireplace. My hand brushed over the frame. Evelyn's threats. Caleb's smirk. Those phony documents. They thought this was over. They didn't realize they'd just made their first move. I reached for the kettle, poured hot tea into a third cup. The steam curled upward like morning mist. Ivy took it from me, and though her hands still trembled faintly, her grip didn't falter. Wrapped in a plaid blanket, Ivy sat on the couch, her knees pulled close, her eyes red and swollen. "It's my fault," she whispered, staring down at the floor. "I let them take the house." The words hit like a slap. I set the kettle down harder than I meant to, the soft crackle of the fire the only sound filling the silence of the cottage. Outside, rain tapped against the windows, a gentle, steady rhythm as evening folded into dusk. "None of this is your fault," I said, sitting beside her. My voice was steady, but my chest ached with every word. The scent of cedar and chamomile tea hung in the room, grounding us in this quiet moment. The old mantel clock ticked away, indifferent. Ivy's hair was tangled, her skin pale, but she was here, safe now in my little place just outside Marlow Heights. Last night, I'd brought her home, away from that house, the one that was supposed to be hers. Caleb and Evelyn had turned it into something else entirely, a place where she didn't belong. Now it was time to take it back. She shook her head, clutching the teacup with both hands. I should have stood up to them. To Caleb. Her voice cracked, and I reached for her hand. Her fingers were cold, trembling slightly. "You trusted him," I said gently. "That's not a weakness. It's what good people do." Her eyes lifted to meet mine, and for a moment, I saw the little girl she used to be, the one who laughed with her mother's energy, who ran barefoot across riverbanks, who once reeled in her first trout with a squeal of delight. I remembered that day by the lake. She'd been no older than 7, her braids bouncing as she wrestled with the fishing rod. "You'll always keep me safe, right, Dad?" she'd asked. I'd nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Always." Now, that promise burned inside me again, clear, fierce, and unshakable. The house was hers. I'd given it to her. The white walls, the garden, the future she had imagined. I wasn't going to let anyone steal that from her. "We need a plan," I said, squeezing her hand. "They think they've won. But they're wrong." A faint smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "What can we do?" she asked. "Those documents." Her voice faltered, and the fear returned to her eyes. Those forged papers Caleb had waved around like a sword, paper-thin lies, but powerful enough to make her doubt herself. "They're not real," I told her. "Not yet proven, but I'll find a way." I stood, crossing to the small table where my keys lay under the soft glow of firelight. The cottage, warm and worn, was filled with reminders of the life we'd built, books stacked high, shelves cluttered with Ivy's childhood photos, vacation souvenirs, drawings faded with time. I know someone, I said. Linda Russell. She's sharp. A lawyer I met years ago, tough as nails. Ivy nodded slowly, taking a sip of her tea. The cup warmed her fingers. It was a small gesture, but I saw the shift in her, like a flicker of hope catching fire in her chest. What if they fight back? She asked, her voice quiet again. They will, I said, looking straight at her. But so will we. That smile returned, fragile but real, and she leaned against me, her head resting on my shoulder. I wrapped an arm around her, the wool blanket soft beneath my hand. Outside, the rain picked up, drumming steadily on the roof and door. But in here, we were calm, two people in the eye of a storm, planning our way out. I reached for my phone and found Linda's number. I'll call her tomorrow, I said. Ivy looked up. Her eyes, though tired, were clearer now. You really think we can win this? I know we can, I said, my voice carrying a conviction I hadn't felt in days. She nodded, holding her cup tighter, and I knew in that moment she believed me. I stepped into the kitchen and dialed. The phone rang 3 times, then Linda's voicemail picked up. I left a short message. It's Victor Harrow. I need your help. I ended the call and sat back down, taking Ivy's hand again. The fire crackled. The rain pounded. But for the first time in a long while, the future felt like something we could shape. The next day, I walked into Linda Russell's office. The glass door side shut behind me, sealing out the city noise. Her space was sleek, polished wood floors, a glass-top desk, and the faint scent of coffee drifting from a machine in the corner. Through the panoramic windows, Marlow Heights shimmered in late morning light. Linda, ever composed, adjusted her glasses and slid a folder across the desk. Those documents are fake, she said, her tone crisp. But we'll need more than suspicion. We need hard proof. I let out a slow breath, my chest loosening slightly. It wasn't over, but we finally had something real. I sat across from her, the leather chair creaking beneath me, and flipped through the folder. Caleb's documents were inside. Too clean. Fonts mismatched. Signatures inconsistent. How do we prove it? I asked, my fingers trailing along the edges of the pages. Forgers always leave traces, Linda replied, leaning back. Mismatched dates, subtle typos, improper formatting. I've seen it all before. Her confidence steadied me, but her next words focused me. But we'll need more than that to bury them. Something personal. I nodded. My thoughts raced. The office was bright, almost clinical, but Linda's presence gave it gravity, sharp eyes, no-nonsense tone. I'd called her just last night, after Ivy had fallen asleep by the fire, and she'd agreed to meet right away. Now here we were, drafting the opening moves of a war. What do you suggest? I asked. Linda smiled. Just slightly. A private investigator. Someone who knows how to dig. People like Evelyn, they always have something to hide. The word skeletons hung in the air, and I saw Evelyn's perfectly composed face flash through my mind, her posture too perfect, her expressions too polished. I could practically hear her heels echoing on the floor of Ivy's house. She'd underestimated us. They both had. I remembered years ago when colleagues at the firm used to laugh behind my back, calling me a dreamer, idealist, naive. But I'd rebuilt that company from the ground up, brick by brick, deal by deal, until those same people were shaking my hand and asking for advice. Now Caleb and Evelyn thought they could outmaneuver me, thought they could steal what I'd given to my daughter and walk away unscathed. They were about to learn the same lesson. Know anyone good? I asked. Linda slid a business card across the desk. The name Mark Wilson stood out in bold serif print. He's a pit bull, she said. Pricey, but he doesn't miss. I took the card and slipped it into my pocket. Its edges bent slightly in my grip, like a key or maybe a fuse. My phone buzzed. Ivy. Her voice came through soft and anxious. Dad, any news? I glanced at Linda, who nodded and stepped to the tall window overlooking Marlow Heights, its towers cutting across the sky like teeth. We're making progress, I told Ivy, keeping my tone steady. Linda's on it. I heard a quiet exhale, relief, fragile and small. "You're sure we can trust her?" she asked. "Absolutely," I said, my eyes still on the folder Linda had given me. "Just hang tight." There was a pause. Then, softly, "Thanks, Dad." The call ended. Linda returned to the desk, already scribbling notes. "We'll file a motion to challenge the documents," she said, her pen moving with purpose. "Mark will dig. If either of them, Caleb or Evelyn, have secrets, he'll find them." I nodded, fingers brushing the edge of the business card in my coat pocket. The office buzzed quietly around us, phones ringing, keyboards tapping. It all pulsed like a slow drumbeat beneath the moment. I saw Ivy's faint smile from the night before, and I knew this was worth every dollar, every risk, every step into the dark. Linda stood and extended her hand. "We've got this, Victor. Go home to your daughter." I shook her hand. Firm. Certain. Then I grabbed the folder and walked out. The glass door swung open, spilling me into the chaos of the city. The morning air was sharp. I pulled out Mark's card again. His number stared back at me, clean, bold, and full of promise. I tucked it away. My steps were quicker now. The weight of the folder under my arm reminded me exactly what we were fighting for. The next day, rain fell steadily as I stood under a sprawling oak tree in Holloway Park. Its branches sagged under the weight of wet leaves, sheltering me from the worst of the drizzle. Mark Wilson approached from the footpath, trench coat swinging, a manila envelope tucked beneath one arm. "Evelyn isn't as clean as she pretends," he said, voice low and dry, like gravel underfoot. A faint smirk tugged at his lips as he handed over the envelope. The paper was damp at the corners, but I felt its weight. Not heavy, but potent. Charged. The park was quiet except for the hum of distant traffic and the whisper of rain through the trees. The scent of pine and wet earth filled the air. I opened the envelope carefully. Inside, glossy photos slid into my hand. Evelyn, exiting a hotel, her arm locked with a man who clearly wasn't her husband. Another photo showed her laughing with him, heads close, intimacy written in their body language. My pulse quickened. "How'd you get these?" I asked, keeping my voice even. Mark lit a cigarette, the flame a brief flicker against the gray. "Tailed her for a week. She's not careful. Meets him every Tuesday. Same hotel. Same time." He exhaled smoke, his eyes scanning my reaction with surgical precision. I slipped the photos back into the envelope, the paper crinkling like dry leaves. The rain was easing now, pooling in patches along the path. Evelyn's face filled my mind, smug, sharp, confident. I imagined her waving those forged papers, convinced no one could touch her. She was wrong. I remembered a former colleague, decades ago, begging me for forgiveness after embezzling from the firm. I'd let him go. Back then, I was too soft. Not this time. "How solid is this?" I asked, tucking the envelope beneath my coat. Mark's cigarette flared one last time before he flicked it into a puddle. "Solid enough to scare her. She's got a reputation she guards like a bank vault. This'll crack it wide open." He paused, his tone even sharper. "Use it wisely." I nodded, the gears in my head already turning. Not yet. The timing had to be precise. When it mattered most, when it would break the illusion they were hiding behind. My phone buzzed again. Ivy. Her voice was tight. "Dad? Any updates?" I stepped further under the canopy, shielding the phone from the rain. "We're getting there," I told her. Vague, but true. "Trust me." She paused. "I do," she whispered. Even through the cold, her words warmed something in me. "I'll call soon," I said, then hung up. Mark raised an eyebrow. "Your daughter?" I nodded. He didn't ask anything else, just tipped his hat and walked off, his coat vanishing into the silver dusk like smoke. I stood there for a while, alone, the rain now a light mist falling through the trees. The envelope was pressed to my chest. A secret. A weapon. A wedge I could drive straight into the lies holding Caleb and Evelyn together. I thought of Ivy safe, for now, back at the cottage. Her voice still fragile, but no longer broken. Her hope wasn't gone. It just needed help to grow. These photos were a start. A lever. I'd given her that house to build a future, not to be cornered and stripped of her voice. I wouldn't let anyone steal that from her, not Caleb, not Evelyn, not anyone. I walked back to the car. The gravel crunched under my boots. The air inside was thick with the scent of leather and rain-soaked fabric. I set the envelope on the passenger seat. Its corner curled slightly ready. The road ahead gleamed wet and dark. My headlights pierced through the gloom as I started the engine. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my mind was already racing, planning the moment. The confrontation. The shatter point. I'd face Evelyn soon. And when I did, I'd watch her facade crumble. Later that night, I slammed my fist against her front door. The witch shuddered under the impact. The envelope was in my other hand, sealed, silent, and ready to explode everything she thought she controlled. The house, Ivy's house, stood quiet and dim, its curtains drawn tight. But I knew they were inside. "Open up," I called, my voice echoing along the dark, narrow street in Brookhaven. Ivy stood just behind me, her breath uneven. Her hand brushed against mine, not out of fear, but resolve. The door creaked open. Evelyn stood in the entryway, her usual smirk flickering as she caught the look in my eyes. "You've got 10 minutes to get out," I said, stepping into the house. The air was thick, musty with the stench of old coffee, stale perfume, and cigarette smoke. Boxes littered the floor. A half-finished glass of wine teetered near the edge of the coffee table. Caleb looked up from the couch, the glow from his phone lighting his face. His posture stiffened as he saw the envelope in my hand. "What's this, old man?" he snapped. I dropped the envelope on the table. A single photo slid out, Evelyn, arm in arm with a man who was definitely not her husband. Her laugh frozen in grainy stillness. Her face drained of color. She moved toward the photo instinctively, but stopped short. "Where did you get that?" she hissed, her voice low and shaking. "Doesn't matter," I said, calm and cold. "It's going public unless you leave." "Now." Ivy stepped forward, and for the first time in weeks, her voice was steady. "This is my house," she said, her gaze locked on Caleb. "You don't belong here." Caleb scoffed, but the sound was thin. His knuckles whitened around his phone. "You think a few pictures are going to scare us? We've got documents. Legal ones." I shook my head, pulling out my phone. "Forgery's a crime, Caleb. So is harassment. The police are on their way." It was a bluff. But Evelyn didn't know that. Her eyes widened, her breath caught. "You wouldn't dare," she whispered. But her voice trembled. I remembered Ivy at 6 years old, hiding behind my legs when a neighbor's dog barked too loudly. I'd knelt down, promised her she was safe. That promise never left me. Now, they had tried to break her, humiliate her in her own home. And I had come to end it. "You made this choice," I said. "I'm offering you one chance to walk away." Evelyn lunged for the photo. But Ivy was faster. She snatched it first, holding it up like a shield. Her voice rose, unwavering. "No more lies." Caleb stood abruptly. His face flushed, fists clenched. "You're bluffing," he said, but his eyes flicked toward Evelyn, who had gone pale. Her nails dug into her palms. "Please," Evelyn said suddenly, her voice breaking. "Don't do this. I'll leave." The surrender was quiet, but it was real. Ivy reached for my hand, gripping tightly. I squeezed back, pride swelling in my chest. She was standing tall now, unshaken. "You've got 5 minutes," I said, stepping aside. Evelyn's shoulders sagged, panic settling into her expression. Caleb cursed and kicked a box, its contents spilling across the floor like forgotten baggage. But Ivy didn't flinch. She stayed rooted beside me, her chin lifted, no longer the woman they had tried to break. The room felt smaller now. Their power, whatever illusion they thought they held, was dissolving. I turned toward the front door, guiding Ivy out, but her voice stopped me. "Wait," she said. She faced them both, eyes hard. "You'll never control me again." The night air met us as we stepped onto the porch. It was cool, damp with the tail end of a rainstorm. The lawn sparkled faintly under the street lamps. The keys to the house sat in my pocket, warm, solid, real. They were hers. Always had been. Inside, Evelyn's voice broke the silence, sharp and desperate. "This is your fault," she shouted. Caleb's response was loud, frantic but muffled. Ivy leaned against me. Her breath was calm now. We'd won this round. I didn't need to look back. The keys were enough. A scream pierced the quiet from inside the house, raw and jagged. "This is on you, Caleb. You ruined everything." I stood on the porch, the night pressing in, the damp grass beneath our feet. A suitcase thudded against the floor. Its clasp snapped open. Dresses and scarves spilled out onto the porch like shattered illusions. Caleb came storming out, dragging a box, his face flushed and wild. "Don't pin this on me," he yelled. "You and your little secrets." Ivy didn't move. Her hand rested lightly on my arm. Her gaze followed him without flinching. Behind us, the house loomed tall and silent, a witness to everything. Its windows reflected the flicker of chaos unraveling inside. Neighbors had begun to peek out from behind drawn curtains and screen doors. Their murmurs drifted into the air like static. Ivy stepped forward. Her voice was strong, clear. "This is my home," she said, facing Caleb as he shoved the box into the trunk of his car. "You don't get to take it." Evelyn stumbled out next, her hair loose, a scarf half dragging from her handbag. "You think this is over?" she spat. But her voice trembled, and her eyes started nervously toward the neighbors watching. Ivy didn't blink. "It is for you." Those 4 words sliced through the air. Evelyn froze. Then, without warning, she turned on Caleb, grabbing his arm with sharp fingers. "Get the car ready, you idiot." He wrenched free, muttering curses, and tossed a lamp into the trunk. The lampshade buckled instantly. I remembered Ivy at 17, facing down a friend who betrayed her trust. Her voice had trembled, but her will had not. And now I saw her again, no longer afraid, no longer broken. She had found her voice, found her power. And I was right there beside her, one hand resting on her shoulder, watching their little empire collapse at last. The suitcase lay open on the lawn, a pair of heels glinting in the grass like fallen trophies, symbols of Evelyn's crumbling control. "They're done," I whispered. Ivy nodded, her lips curling into a faint, satisfied smile. Caleb slammed the car trunk shut, his hands visibly shaking. "We're not finished," he muttered, though his eyes refused to meet hers. Evelyn climbed into the passenger seat, her face a mask of rage, and barked at him to hurry. Across the street, Mrs. Elson, one of the longtime neighbors, stepped onto her porch, arms crossed. "Good riddance," she said, loud enough for us to hear. I caught her eye and nodded, thankful for the silent support. "Get in the car," Evelyn snapped. Caleb obeyed, his shoulders hunched as he slid behind the wheel. The engine roared to life, headlights cutting a path through the dusk. Ivy stood next to me, gripping the house keys. The metal glinted in her hand, no longer just a keychain, but a symbol of everything she had reclaimed. And I saw it, the woman she was becoming. Strong, steady, unshaken. "They're gone," she said quietly, but the words were heavy with certainty. I squeezed her shoulder, my chest tight with relief. The car peeled away down the street, tires screeching. Silence settled like a blanket. The neighbors slowly stepped back inside. Their curtains fell, but their presence remained a quiet shield around us. Ivy turned to the house. The door was still open, warm light spilling onto the porch like a welcome. "It's mine again," she whispered, as though saying it made it real. I nodded. The keys in her hand, the doorway ahead, this was a promise kept. She stepped forward, framed by the doorway. I followed, ready to help her reclaim every corner they had tried to take. Weeks later, Ivy laughed, dirt smudging her hands as we planted roses in the garden. The early summer sun warmed our backs. The air smelled of fresh soil, blooming flowers, and new beginnings. "These are perfect," she said, gently patting the earth around a young rose bush. The petals danced in the breeze like tiny flags of victory. Behind us, the house gleamed, its walls freshly painted, windows open, new curtains fluttering in the wind. I wiped my forehead with the back of my hand and smiled. We were rebuilding, one piece at a time. Inside, the scent of fresh bread filled the air. A loaf cooled on the counter beside a vase of wildflowers. Ivy had spent the morning arranging framed photos and hanging her childhood sketches along the walls. The chaos Caleb and Evelyn had brought was gone. Their boxes had been cleared out. The floor, once scuffed and dirty, now shone with care. A month earlier, she had signed the divorce papers, the final chain severed. The house was legally, officially, hers. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like a home. Need more soil? I asked, lifting a half-full bag. She shook her head, her ponytail swinging. We're good, Dad. Her smile was bright, clear, open, the kind I hadn't seen since before the storm began. I remembered the day I bought this place, imagining her exactly like this, happy, free, building a life. That dream had nearly slipped through our fingers, but we fought for it. And now, watching her dig with steady hands, I knew every sacrifice had been worth it. Across the street, Mr. Carter waved, a pie in his hands. "Welcome back, Ivy," he called, stepping across the grass. She stood and wiped her hands on her jeans, her grin genuine. "Thanks, Tom." He handed her the pie, and she accepted it with a nod of appreciation. Neighbors had been stopping by all week, offering casseroles, help, smiles. Their support wasn't loud, but it was steady. Brookhaven had chosen her side. We carried the pie inside, sunlight spilling into the kitchen. Ivy set it on the counter beside her keys. The engraved tag Ivy caught the light, glinting like a badge of honor. "I couldn't have done this without you," she said, turning to me. Her eyes were clear now. No trace of fear. No hint of the woman who had once whispered from the shadows of her own home. I pulled her into a hug, her hair brushing against my chin. "You're stronger than you know," I said, my voice catching. She hugged me back, then stepped away, her smile fierce. "I'll be even stronger now. I promise." And I believed her. I thought of her at 10, drawing her dream home on a diner napkin, big windows, a garden, a place full of light. I'd sold half my life to make that drawing real. And here we were laughing in the sunlight, dirt on our hands, her dreams blooming from the soil. The roses outside nodded in the breeze, petals unfolding like a new beginning. "Want to finish the planting?" I asked. She grabbed the trowel. "Let's do it." We stepped back out, the sun rising higher. The garden stretched before us like a canvas, waiting. That evening, we sat on the porch. The sky was streaked in orange and pink, the warmth of the house spilling out behind us. Ivy leaned lightly against my arm, our hands brushing. "This is home," she said. Her voice was soft, but sure. I nodded, unable to speak as emotion swelled in my throat. The sunset bathed the street, the garden, the porch, this life we had fought to reclaim. The keys rested on the table just inside the door. No longer a battleground. Just a promise fulfilled. End of story.